I want to start today's episode with an apology that also might sound like a bit of an excuse, but I feel I need to do it, right? I made a commitment to start podcasting, and I felt that it would be something that would help me to help you by sharing tactics and ideas and strategies and all of those kind of juicy, lovely things that, at least in my opinion, I think are going to be helpful. And twice now in the time that I've been doing the podcast, I found myself getting distracted. Distracted by other things, which has meant the episodes of the pod have been less frequent than I would have liked. It's been quiet from me, I appreciate, for at least 6 weeks. And that was never the intention. So I'm sorry if you've missed me. If you've not had the opportunity to hear me every week whilst you're out on your dog walk, I apologise. And it sounds like an excuse because ultimately it is, right? I've been busy. I've been distracted. I've had other things to do. And the moment that I start saying those things out loud, I realise the irony of the whole thing. I invest so much time talking to people, helping people to build plans, challenging people and holding them accountable to the things that they'd promised that they would do. And here I am, guilty of not doing the thing that I had promised myself I would do. I promised myself I would release an episode every single week. And I did, for somewhere in the region of 38 episodes. Apparently, once you get past episode 10, you start to fall into a groove. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened over the course of the last 6 to 7 weeks. So I'm here to fix it. My intention is a declaration to you all. I intend to publish a podcast every single week for the rest of this year. And I'd like you to hold me accountable to it. Because I know how important it is to have that buddy, that person who holds you to the fire on the things that you know they are the right thing to do. And I do have enough time in the week. There is ample opportunity for me to be able to grab 20 minutes here or half an hour there to do the work. For whatever reason, I've allowed myself to believe my own excuses. Which leads us really nicely into this episode, right? It's so important that as you go about doing whatever it is that you do for a living in recruitment, delivery, sales, account management, you've got absolute clarity on the things that you consider to be your non-negotiables. And your non-negotiables are your standards. I should have a standard, which is every single week I need to ensure I record a minimum of 2 episodes of the podcast. That becomes a standard. It's not a goal. A goal is aspirational. If I set that for myself as a goal, I allow myself to create the excuse at the end of the week why I only did 1. Or I didn't have time to do any, but it's okay. Last week I did 2. So that's going to cover the shortfall. And as I start to create my own excuses and reasons and self-justifications, the only person that I'm kidding is me, right? And I hope as I talk about that, it transfers over to you to start to think about your standards, right? What are the standards that you know you should be setting for yourself that on occasion you allow to slip? The things that you tolerate, they become the definition of the new standards. You might have a standard where you feel my minimum expectation of self is I will not work on any jobs where the fee is less than 18% of the first year's annual salary. And you set that for yourself as a standard. Yet when you look at the reality of what you're doing, there's a 16%er here, there's a 17.5%er there, there's a couple of 15%ers with some legacy clients. The things that you're tolerating are the standards. If you genuinely wish to see an elevation of your minimum expectation of self and you set it as a standard, you need to be willing to hold yourself to the fire. You need to be willing to be held accountable, not by anybody else, but by yourself. And there are times when finding that accountability buddy can be really important. Some of you listening to this may be sole traders. As a sole trader, you'll know other sole traders. Creating an accountability loop between the two of you would make sense. And to have a fortnightly check-in, to hold each other to the fire with a genuine agreed rule. Excuses are not acceptable if the standard has been agreed. And it may be that you need to set yourself some standards in areas where perhaps you've allowed yourself to be a little more, shall I say, agile or a bit more dynamic. The standards that you set for yourself as to minimum expectations of action and activity that could be linked to certain outcomes, which might look like how much time you invest in doing something like sales and business development. Because it's the classic place where the excuses turn up. I've been too busy today to do my BD, but it's okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Or this week I've been working on so many jobs, I haven't had time to do BD. And we create the reason stack that feels logical. It doesn't sound like it's an excuse, it sounds like it's a justification. And it helps us to feel better as we go into the following week that it's okay. And then at some point in the future, and let's go forward maybe 7 weeks, we find that our job flow or our client acquisition work is starting to feel compromised. Not because of what we're doing in the moment, but because of what we didn't do in the past. So my recommendation to you, as a leaf out of my own book, right? Those of you listening in audio, I'm holding up a book. Those of you on YouTube, you can see my book, yeah, with my scribbles. These are the standards that I've set for myself. These are my new non-negotiables as to what I intend to do with consistency. And because I've set them as a standard, they're not aspirations. Standards are a minimum expectation. The standards by which we respond to messages, the standards by which we define what a good job looks like, the standards by which we set the tone for activity that revolves around things that are in our control, that might look like outreach, that might look like attempted dials for sales calls, that might look like the number of individuals we intend to talk to on every live mandate that we get. The entirety of our activity could start to become a set of standards. And in some agencies they get called KPIs. I don't feel that they're a KPI, right? 20 business development calls per week. It's not a KPI. There is no indication of performance. What there is an indication of intent, an indication of discipline, an indication of purpose. But there's no performance measured in it, right? Because it's simply a standard. 20 BD calls a week. Did you or did you not achieve? Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Standard achieved. Minimum standard not met. What there is linked to the activity, which is the standard, is an outcome. And the outcome we call a goal. And the outcome that we head towards, which is a goal, that is aspirational. If I can do 20 of these a week, the goal is I achieve 3 of these. And 3 of these might look like booked meetings. So if I can control my input device as a standard, because that's totally in my control, hit 20 of these every single week and I'll be a happy chappy. But I will be a super happy chappy if 20 of those as an input starts to look like 3 of these as an output. And when it becomes 3 of these as an output, I'm now achieving an aspirational goal. And if I'm not achieving the aspirational goal, which is the output intended from the standard, I need to look at the quality of the work that I'm doing in the confines of the standard to achieve the goal. And that, my friends, is called the performance. And that's where the KPI sits. So a 20 input device, 20 calls a week, a 3 output device, 3 meetings per week, we now have a KPI which looks like 15%. 15% of inputs should result in the desired output. If we are below the line, so let's say we do 20 of the inputs and we achieve 2 of the outputs, we now have a performance indicator of 10%. This is now below expectation. This is below the goal. The goal is an aspiration. It doesn't mean that we failed. It means we need to review the performance through which we convert 20 of those into 2 of these, or 3 of these, or 4 of these. And because the conversion, the 15%, the 10% is the KPI, It is indicating the performance. It is not the performance itself. So as we unpack the performance, we look at the performance and think, well, is the list of the 20 contacted strong enough that there would be valid reasons why we would seek to meet with them and valid enough reasons as to why they would seek to meet with us? So if the quality of the input device, i.e. the people who have been chosen to be contacted as decision makers, if that is weak, then that is the beginning of the performance starting to wobble. If the list is good, and we then look at, well, how well have we ambushed or interrupted them? What have we done to be able to position ourselves as being somebody to pay attention to? Or have we not done any positioning? And have we simply chased their attention and tried to keep them on the phone and found that we got fobbed off? So there is the quality of the positioning, another part of the performance. Or thirdly, it is the structure by which we go through an investigative process to make sure that they clearly understand the problem that we fix and how eloquent our solution is to get them committed to the idea of a meeting. So then there is the quality of the investigation and the problem identification. And then fourthly, there is the closing. How well do we actually position the meeting with purpose and intent to then close them on the idea of yes, that is a very good idea. I totally agree. Now would be a great time to do that. It would be crazy to think the only time I should meet you is when I'm urgently seeking to fill a vacancy, because I'm probably going to have other things on my mind. So as we unpack that, without the standard in place, the goal becomes questionable. If we don't set the standard and we just say, when I've got time, I'll do BD. And I don't mind, right? I so don't mind whether you choose to do BD with a telephone, with LinkedIn, with video, with email, with the post, right? I don't mind. All of them are legitimate channels. What I would say is we all have a favourite channel, and sometimes it's the channel we defer to out of comfort, not because of conversion, and other times we have a favourite channel due to conversion. What I do know is the more channels that you use, the more likely it is you get the outcome. We're back to performance again. So if we haven't defined the input device, we haven't defined the standard, we haven't made a commitment to self as to what is non-negotiable. Everything is negotiable in the moment of time. Do I have time to do BD? Do I even have a list together? You know those moments in some agencies when the boss, we'll call them the boss, right? Probably they're the only person who calls themselves the boss. Everyone else will call them like, I don't know, Jane or Gary or whatever their name is. But they'll be like, I'm the boss here. And the boss says, guys, people, everyone, it's a little quiet or jobs are down. We're going to have a sales day and it begins now. And it was, whoa, sales day now, right. So everyone get on the phone. Let's see how many meetings we can get. And there is this scramble for meetings. And because there was a scramble for meetings, there was a scramble for list building. Many of the people who pulled together their lists, they're like, oh, we've got to get some meetings. I don't want to let the team down. Oh, God, who am I going to call? I'll call all of the people I know that I know, and I know that they know me, because they're kind of a shoo-in, and I reckon I'll be able to get some meetings. I'm not entirely sure whether the meetings will produce anything, but really the goal is let's get some meetings. So there was a scramble for meetings. There is little thought put into the lists that are built other than ease of access and compliance to say yes. Very little thought goes into who are the people who've always ignored me, who are the chicken calls, who are the people that I should be targeting because of my perceptions of their intent to make a purchase over the course of the next 6 weeks, who are the people that I should be targeting who are most likely to have the problems that I actually solve. And everyone goes into like transactional mode of, oh, it's a sales day. And as the energy increases, the outputs increase without necessarily being fully targeted. The goals start to be achieved, and little thought is then paid to the sales day over the course of the next 2 weeks to actually look at how well did these meetings go, what were the outcomes, Who are the people that said yes that then didn't? Who are the people that said yes and then did? And what has been produced from it? And what happened to all of the people that said no, not today, or maybe? And then what happened to the people who we couldn't get hold of at all? Or do we just hang on to them for the next sales day? Intensity of activity is often driven, that creates compliance of action, not necessarily commitment to outcome, and certainly not something that inspires people to perform at their best. And I'm not saying that belongs to the boss, because it doesn't. It belongs to you. And if you are the boss, you need to ensure that the accountability sits with people, right? That there is clarity amongst the entire team. What are the standards by which we operate? What are our minimum expectations as a collective? What are your minimum expectations as individuals? What are the goals that you're aspiring to achieve from those standards? What does a good performance look like in between the two? How do you ensure that you are achieving the conversion rates that we would anticipate, which is why we set the numbers as standards in the first place? Because if, as a business, we believe 20 of those should create 3 of those, anyone who is not able to produce the outcome from the inputs, they need some help. They need a hug. They need some coaching. Anyone who can't achieve the input, which is the 20 conversations, they need some help. They need a hug. They need some coaching. Yet all too frequently when we talk about the consequences of not achieving the input device, the picture that people draw in their head of consequences is a negative connotation. There could be a positive outcome, right? There could be somebody who sat there who is struggling so much to be able to achieve the 20 conversations because of a lack of organization, because of an ill thought out process of being able to build lists, not having enough clarity on the ICP that they're targeting because they don't fully understand what are the problems that I fix as a temp consultant or as a perm consultant or as a contract recruiter. And they just get busy, and they get busy and distracted by other things. Which brings me back to my own situation, right? I'm setting myself a standard that I'm declaring in public. My intention is this: I'll release a podcast every week. The goal is aspirational. The goal of it is I would like to see that it increases people's awareness of who I am, how I operate, and the power of your people engine to help commercial organizations in recruitment improve productivity per head. And if it can achieve that, I'd like to think it will help me to generate business. And the strange thing is, people, it's proven to do that for me in the past. Yet for whatever reason, I allowed myself to get distracted. But now that I've started to become more aware of the importance of the standards I set for myself, the easier it is now for me to start to picture the discipline that's required to be able to deliver the plan. Because I think I got distracted by things like my mood. And if I didn't feel like doing the recording at that particular moment, there was always something else to do. I think I allowed myself to get distracted by other work. And because I got distracted by other work, I allowed other work to overconsume time. I think I also got distracted by the fact that no one's making me do this. So it's all down to me to make sure that I am doing what I need to do. And I just became a bit soft on myself. So I hope for those of you who've stuck with this particular episode, everyone's comfortable with the relationship between the things that I'm describing, right? Whether they are passed to you or not by leadership. As a billing consultant, it is important you have absolute clarity on your own standards. Standards of behaviour. Standards of activity. Because without them, you can become busy and not necessarily productive. Without them, you might find that at some point in the future, you realise the lack of consistency of some simple input devices is now having an impact on the health of your desk. And at the moment you realise your desk is less healthy than it should be, the more you start to think about the moment of, but I'm doing all of the right things. Maybe it's the market, not thinking about the events that didn't happen in the past. when you've got clarity on your standards and you start to think about what is the purpose of the action. There are people today in recruitment agencies chasing a KPI. I've got to get my BD done. I've got to get my 10 calls done. I've got to be able to get my, whatever the KPI is that's been set for them, that isn't. They're chasing the number. And because they're chasing the number, they're not thinking about the goal of the number, because the number is the goal. So they even get to the point where perhaps they hit their KPI at the end of the week and they go, phew, I can now go into my weekly review able to say I did my number. And because they haven't thought about the purpose of the number, the achievement of the number itself starts to satisfy them that it's job done. And they end up having a meeting with a team leader or a manager who also doesn't understand the importance of the number. And they simply say, good work, you hit your KPIs this week. Keep doing that, it'll happen. No, it won't. It won't happen for the person who's chasing the KPI if they're not thinking about the outcome of the KPI. So we need to start to label these things properly as the standards that they truly are. And then start to talk about what are your aspirational goals from your standards. And as we have cleaner conversations with ourselves, or we have cleaner conversations with our team, we can then talk about the relationship between those two devices and start to call those the KPIs. The relationship between two numbers. It's either a ratio or it is a percentage. Job fill is a performance indicator as a ratio, right? 67% of all temp jobs filled, performance indicator. Input device jobs, output device, bookings filled. So when you start to look with more sophistication at how you manage your desk, how you manage your time, how you manage yourself, it helps you to become a better manager in the future. And if you're currently a manager and you find yourself talking too much about singular numbers that revolve around input devices and being frustrated at the lack of output devices being created, you need to step back and start to think about, how do I make it easier for my team to truly understand what it takes to succeed in recruitment, and start to be able to table a process of agreeing some standards, setting some aspirational goals that we seek to achieve from said standards, and then identify what are the key performance indicators that start to show the quality of the input device, and the journey to achieve the goal is improving, so that we start to see an increase in people's productivity. So I started this episode with an apology. I hope my apology is accepted. And somewhere hidden inside the apology were some excuses. And the apologies and the excuses come to you with best intention. But I realise as I say them, I sound like a consultant in a one-to-one, sharing all of the reasons why I didn't do my sales calls this week, or I didn't have time to advertise all of those jobs, or the shoulda, woulda, coulda, without feeling like I deliberately avoided. We've just got to the end of the week and I've burnt all of my budget, which was my 50 hours that I'd allocated to this thing called work, and realised I hadn't apportioned enough of it to the things that were called input devices, because I didn't have clarity on the standards, because I perceived them as being a KPI, and there were other things that I wanted to achieve that kept me busy doing something else rather than doing the thing that mattered. So folks, thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening. Of course, if you've got any questions, you know where to find me. But other than that, work hard, be good, set some standards, have clarity on what the goal is for every single day and every single week that you rock up in life to this thing called work, and start to look at your performance as being something you can enhance when you've got total clarity on the relationship between your inputs and your outputs. Have a great day, people.